So, but before we do that, you would have received your minutes via email. Did you all have a chance to look at those? Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did, and since I made a lot of motions in those minutes, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve them.
So I have a motion to approve the minutes of January 22nd, 24th, 29th, and 31st. Do I have a second? Okay, Senator Straub seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Discussion, motion carries. So thank you very much. And I would like to recognize Senator Francisco. She has some guests with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to have 3 pages with me today from Bishop Seabury in Lawrence. So if they'd stand, as I call their names, Catherine Udaley, Xavier Cooper, and Hugh Griggs. So welcome to the committee.
Well, welcome to our committee. I was a page in 1981. Was anyone else a page in here? And what year do you want to say?
About 1970. Yeah, right around in there.
Our picture was
Senate.
black and white too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, very much.
Well, welcome to the committee, guys. All right, well, we'll just hop into our presentation. Some people are going to be coming and going, so we'll let you listen to our State Bank Commissioner, David Herndon. Welcome to the committee, David. We're happy you're with us.
For having me here this morning. My name is David Herndon, and it's my good fortune to serve as the Kansas State Bank Commissioner, a position that I've held for the past 5 years. By Kansas statutes, the bank commissioner is required to have a minimum of 5 years' experience as a senior executive in a Kansas state chartered bank. I met that requirement with a 45-year career with banks in Wyandotte, Johnson, Douglas, Shawnee, and Sedgwick counties, and included a 25-year-plus stint as a bank president, CEO, and director. I appear today to report on the condition of financial institutions regulated by my agency, the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, that goes by the OSBC acronym. Despite the agency name, however, the OSBC regulates more than just the 170 state-chartered banks in Kansas. We also regulate 45 trust companies and departments, 12,763 non-depository consumer credit providers that would include things like mortgage businesses, mortgage loan originators, supervised lenders, credit service organizations, and money transmitters. And we also regulate one technology-enabled fiduciary financial institution, or a TEFI, that does business in our state. Perhaps the most significant function of my agency is to conduct regulatory safety and soundness compliance and information technology examinations on these institutions. Banks and trust companies are subject to all of those types of examinations, but our non-depository institutions and the TEFI receive only compliance and IT, information technology exams. Safety and soundness examinations on our regulated banks follow and adhere to international industry standards and assign ratings in capital adequacy, asset quality, management, earnings, liquidity, and interest rate sensitivity. Those components are referred to as CAMELS ratings, capital asset management, earnings, liquidity, sensitivity. And it's in compliance with the Uniform Financial Institutions rating systems. A numerical rating from 1 to 5 is assigned to each of those components, resulting in an overall composite rating. But it's not necessarily an average of those 5, because sometimes circumstances require more emphasis on a particular component than just a standard average. The higher the rating, higher being a 3, 4, or 5, the more troubled condition you are considered. So banks and trust companies that are rated 1 and 2 are well run with minimal regulatory oversight required. Banks rated, entities rated 3, 4, or 5 have more regulatory supervision than otherwise. And we have several, depending upon the severity, the likelihood of a quick cure or a long-term, we have several avenues in which to deal with those. But safety and soundness exams are not performed on our consumer or mortgage lending businesses, primarily because they don't hold deposits. So we do compliance exams that are following both state and federal compliance regulations. Typically, for example, Bank Secrecy Act or anti-money laundering types of things, proper disclosures to their borrowers and that sort of thing. IT exams focus on the systems, the procedures, the hardware and software programs to assess adequacy and safeguard clients' personal information. We don't conduct safety and soundness examination on our sole TEFI because we can't. Despite the act referencing safety and soundness expectations, the Kansas TEFI Act that was created in 2021 specifically disallows a safety and soundness examination to consider earnings, a component, and it also assigns any goodwill on the TEFI's balance sheet as a capital component. Both of those are departures from the Uniform Financial Institutions Rating Systems, the Uniform Interagency Trust Rating System, and generally accepted accounting principles. I'll speak more about that in a moment, but first wanted to address the condition of our banks and trust companies. As I mentioned, we have 170 state-chartered banks in Kansas with assets ranging from $11 million, the smallest bank in the state, which is the State Bank of Burton, to $7.3 billion, CrossFirst Bank, headquartered in Leawood. The average bank size is $357 million, and the aggregate of all 170 banks is $60.7 billion. Kansas is one of only 12 states in the country that does not have a single bank over $10 billion, but we're getting close. With CrossFirst at 7.6, their announced plan is to continue their growth. Equity Bank out of Andover is also on a fast track for growth and that sort of thing. So, but of those 170 banks, only 6 are considered troubled institutions. 4 of the 6 have a composite ratings of 3, 1 has a 4 rating, and 1 is a 5 rated. Of the 44 trust companies and departments, only 1 is considered troubled with a 3 rating. Corrective orders and actions implemented by OSBC to cure the cited deficiencies at each of these institutions are underway. Overall, Kansas banks are profitable, they're well capitalized, they have adequate reserves, and overwhelmingly serve their respective markets. Each of you have a snapshot that we publish quarterly, and it's available on our website. We publish this after each quarter when the banks submit their call reports. It gives a snapshot that provides additional information on the health and the adequacy of our banking system. But as I said, the TEFIs were created by the Kansas Legislature in its 2021 session. No other state in the union has adopted TEFI legislation or anything similar to that, and only one entity has sought a TEFI charter in Kansas. Therefore, only one TEFI exists. Consequently, no international industry standards have been created for a TEFI safety and soundness examination. So the remainder of my comments this morning are directed at the TEFI industry and to the sole TEFI that's in existence. The Kansas TEFI Act charged the OSBC as the sole regulator for all TEFIs in Kansas. There is no federal regulator counterpart. When the TEFI Act was introduced and being considered, proponents, especially those directly involved in the drafting of the legislation, were very active in lobbying legislators. A key component of the proponent testimony was a provision in the law that would create an economic benefit for rural Kansas communities, with Harvey County, Kansas being the first designated community. Funds from TEFI business activities were designed to create economic activity in those counties, and in the first one in Harvey County, Kansas, the intent was to build a grocery store in Heston. The proponents' efforts were rewarded with the Tey Act passing unanimously in the Senate and with 82% of the vote in the House. It was signed into the law as soon as it reached the governor's desk. I testified during the law's consideration, urging amendments to the act that would permit OSBC to conduct safety and soundness exams using the international industry accepted protocol. Those amendments were rejected, leading OSBC and the State Banking Board to oppose the adoption of the law. Subsequent testimony that I've delivered before the Joint Committee on TEFI Oversight that was created as a result of this act has repeated my call for similar charges and similar changes. As written, OSBC cannot meet its regulatory charge because we cannot conduct a meaningful safety and soundness exam, so we can't do our jobs. But let me be clear, our opposition was and remains due to the restrictions in the Kansas TEFI Act. We remained neutral regarding the worthiness of the TEFI industry. But acknowledging the limitations imposed, we will examine any TEFI for compliance with federal and state laws and regulations, and we will monitor any TEFI's fiscal health. We simply cannot rate its financial condition, nor can we take any actions, regulatory actions, if we deem are concerned about the fiscal condition. We also conduct, as I mentioned, information technology examinations. Again, only one TEFI exists today. It's Beneficient Fiduciary Financial, or BFF, LLC in Heston, Kansas. It is one of 30-plus subsidiaries of Beneficient, a Nevada corporation that's headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Its charter was granted by the Kansas Legislature, not the OSBC or the State Banking Board. OSBC conducted compliance and IT exams on BFF last year and shared our findings with their board and management. Examinations are confidential, so results cannot be shared with other parties. But since there's only one TEFI in existence, the concern expressed regarding the TEFI Act have focused obviously on BFF. Accepting the premise that a parent company is a source of strength to its subsidiaries, we also monitor Beneficient, the parent company, even though we only regulate its one subsidiary, BFF. Beneficient is not a TEFI. BFF is a TEFI as a subsidiary. Several events, occurrences, and disclosures surrounding BFF's parent company have raised our concerns regarding BFF's future and the TEFI industry that Kansas expected and is supporting. First, Beneficient became a public company last June with its stock listed on the NASDAQ exchange and its shares trading in the $14 to $15 range when it began. It's been in a free fall since, losing 99% of its value based on the stock price, and it's traded at less than 15 cents for the last several months. I looked before this meeting today. Today it's trading at 10 cents per share. To address NASDAQ rules regarding the minimum share price and avoid delisting and increase the share price, we understand the Beneficient's Board of Directors is considering several things, including a reverse stock split that should happen soon. Won't change the value of the overall, it just changes the stock price because a reverse stock split is used to increase stock prices. Next, its quarterly report to the Securities and Exchange Commission, since it is a publicly traded company, for the year-end 2023 contained financial statements and footnotes to those statements. A liquidity and going concern footnote exists in those, and it says, and I'm quoting here, as of December 31, 2023, we had unrestricted cash and cash equivalents of $11.2 million. We generated net losses totaling $924 million and $42.4 million for the 3 months ending December 31, 2023 and December 31, 2022, respectively. For the 9 months that ended December 31, 2023 and 2022, we generated net losses of totaling $2.5 billion and $203.1 million, respectively. As of January 31, 2024, we had unrestricted cash and cash equivalents of approximately $13 million. All of these conditions raise substantial doubt about the company's ability to continue as a going concern. However, based on management's plan, such substantial doubt has been alleviated, end quote. That's from the Beneficient's December 31 10Q filed with the SEC. That same 10Q filing discloses that Beneficient has furloughed, then laid off 30% of its staff. This would imply that it's either a lack of business and or a lack of funds to meet payroll. Additionally, Beneficient has received negative media coverage ranging from critical broadcasts to newspaper articles regarding self-dealing and misuse of company funds by the company and certain of its executives. These allegations are being disputed by the company and the named executives, but remain unresolved. The SEC has issued a Wells notices from the staff of the SEC's Division of Enforcement, stating that that staff has made preliminary determination to recommend that the SEC file a civil enforcement action against Beneficient, alleging violations of certain provisions of the Securities Act and Securities Exchange Act. A Wells notice is not a formal allegation or a finding of wrongdoing, but a preliminary determination by the staff to recommend to the SEC that a civil enforcement action or administrative proceeding be brought against the recipient. Part of the economic benefit to Heston, Kansas from BFF receiving its charter involved the creation of the Beneficient Heartland Foundation to oversee the distribution. It was formed in January of 2022. A 13-member board was named and includes members of the Beneficient senior management, local Heston city officials and business peoples, including a state representative from that area, and also another member who is a member of the Capers Board. Its charge is to direct funding to support community development projects in Heston, Kansas, and other rural communities, colleges, and universities throughout the state. But BFF remains the only chartered TEFI in Kansas, and Kansas remains the only state with a TEFI law. BFF's future is unknown, but a prudent review of the circumstances surrounding the business and the parent company does not paint an optimistic future. It appears that BFF's parent company is financially struggling. It's not been able to generate and or fund the transactions expected, and Heston, Kansas still does not have its anticipated grocery store. As Kansas State Banking Commissioner, it has been suggested by some that I am biased against Beneficient, BFF, the management, and the TEFI industry. I am not. Yet my repeated concerns about the TEFI law have produced adverse consequences for my agency, including the OSBC's budget being cut to zero last year for a short period of time. So I conclude my remarks this morning by reiterating that I, as Kansas State Bank Commissioner, am neutral to the TEFI concept, but I remain opposed to the TEFI law as it exists today, and further am deeply concerned as the sole financial regulator about the future of this industry and this company. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for the handout, too. That's very interesting to see the lowest banks and the highest banks on their deposits. And let's see, I think I saw Senator Thompson's hand first. Senator Schellenberger, is that okay?
Thank you, David. Could we get a PDF version of your testimony on this TEFI? Because it's not in the committee.
I did not prepare one.
Did not prepare one?
But I could send one over.
I would sure appreciate that.
And send it to Randy, and she'll send it out to all of us, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Schellenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Can you simply, in 3 or 4 sentences, tell me how a TEFI is supposed to work? I mean, a bank takes in deposits and makes loans and works on the margins, and I mean, whose capital how are they supposed to make money?
As presented, the TEFI's business model is to serve high net worth and high income individuals and entities that hold intangible assets, something that has minimal, if any, liquidity, buys those assets, that provides the holder of the assets some sort of consideration, assumed to be cash or something that's much more liquid than what they have. Think of a real estate investment portfolio or a hedge fund or something like that, that may be generating minimal cash flow, but it doesn't have the liquidity that cash does. So that's how they make, and then the TEFI presumably buys that at a negotiated price, something of a discount from what the book value might be, and then holds that TEFI until it matures and either becomes a public company or is sold or something that generates cash. And they make their money on the difference between the discounted purchase price and the ultimate price, which would presumably be to par or a premium. That may have been more than 4 sentences.
No, but there's you've got to be leaving something out of that, because that, you can do that without creating a TEFI. I could go buy a hotel from Mary and give her a discounted price. And so is there a tax credit? Is there some, what's the peanut here? I mean, maybe there isn't.
You are, in my opinion, you are correct that the question of should a TEFI be regulated like a bank or a trust company is certainly, in my opinion, a valid question, because they can go. And there is an industry that advertises repeatedly on television and press and that sort of thing that says, if you have a structured settlement, we'll buy it, we'll buy it. That's similar, doesn't have the caveat of high net worth or high income kind of holder. And they may have, I've not done the research, they may have a specific, will only buy something like a structured settlement or a lottery winning or something like that.
There's no tax credit, there's no other something involved in this.
Well, there is a tax benefit, presumably. I can't speak to that. I don't have the accounting or tax background to do that, but there is federal and state tax implications, benefits, and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, your bio is impressive. Your other commissioners, are they all with you, or are they in separate areas of the state, or?
No, we are headquartered here in Topeka. The bank, we have 5 divisions within the OSBC. The banking division has a deputy commissioner. Our non-depository that we call Consumer and Mortgage Lending Division has a deputy commissioner. Our information technology has a director. We have a legal department that has a general counsel, and we have our administrative that makes certain that the bills gets paid.
Okay, and Madam Chair, if I may, so you talked about your regulatory piece. If you're at 1 or 2, you're in good standing, and then the 3, 4, and 5. Can you just elaborate on? You said so they have more oversight, and then can you just, in layman's term, tell me that what the TEFI acronym means, or what's that? Spell that out for me.
First, to the CAMELS ratings in banks, yes, there are various levels of enforcement action that we can impose depending upon the severity and the time of cited weaknesses. Typically, it starts with a board resolution that we address to the entity's board of directors that says, here's the issue, tell us you're going to fix it, and they resolve that they will. Second, or subsequent to that, we might do a memorandum of understanding that says you said you were going to do it, but you haven't yet, so here's a kind of a time frame or a more formal structure, leading to a consent order. That's when it becomes public, because consent orders are available to the public, and then ultimately and finally, regrettably, could be a revocation of the charter and the failure of the institution. As to your question about TEFI, it is an acronym for Technology Enabled Fiduciary Financial Institution.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
A lot there. I'm not too excited about my vote for the TEFI now. I have two different questions. Number one, how many other states have a TEFI? I wonder if there's none or if Delaware does.
There is none that have adopted similar to Kansas's TEFI.
All right, thank you. And then on a different note, when you mentioned about the different banks and then the classification, and when it gets pretty bad, then the notice go out. Is there a list of the banks, the number 1, 2, 3, and so on, that people can see?
We published that in this snapshot that's also available on our website. And you can see in this middle fold, it talks about the ratings history. And it goes back from 2020 to 2023 and the number of banks that are rated 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well, it has the number, but it doesn't have the bank.
We cannot disclose that.
That's what I was wondering.
We cannot disclose it until it becomes a public disclosed document, like a consent order, obviously a bank failure.
And do we have any now that has a consent order?
We have consent orders in place with some institutions, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senator Mcin.
Thank you. I'm going to try to make this even more simpler than Senator Schallenberger, I guess. So I want to start a TEFI. So what's the first thing I do to start a TEFI?
There's an application available through my office to create a TEFI, and it's going to ask you for your, who's organizing it? Is it just you, or are you representing others, that sort of thing? So we'll do a background investigation on every organizer. We'll want to know how much capital is being put in to start the TEFI, and we'll want a very comprehensive business plan. So those are the pillars of getting it. The decision is supposed to go back to my office and then ultimately decided either to approve or disapprove the application by the State Banking Board. Typically, the State Banking Board, although we have not had any de novos, so this is just conceptually how it's supposed to work, would come with a recommendation for approval or denial from my office, but the decision, it rests with the State Banking Board.
So my capital consists of what?
Cash.
All cash, okay?
We would almost 100% of the time, I would think that we would want cash as capital.
Okay. And then I hope that whatever it is that I'm trying to form is going to turn into a business. Did I hear you
That
say?
is the creation of your business.
Of my business.
Of the TEFI business, yes.
So is Beneficient starting several businesses?
Only one TEFI.
Only one TEFI?
Beneficient, as a parent company, as I mentioned, has 30-plus subsidiaries, one of which is BFF, and that's the sole TEFI.
Okay.
Others are related, doing that sort, but we only examine the TEFI.
Okay, so whatever develops is successful, and now I'm the state that created it, because I'm still trying to understand why we do it if we're not benefiting from it. So they're going to pay us back in?
The TEFI Act, as it was written and as it is adopted, has an economic benefit to the state. Each transaction, 2.5% of the transaction is paid to the Commerce Department, and it's presumed to be in cash. And the first one was, but subsequent it's been cash and assets. And I don't know what those assets are.
So that goes to Commerce.
That goes to Commerce, that uses that as an economic development fund in rural counties in Kansas.
So if I called the Department of Commerce and asked them what kind of assets they're receiving, they would be able to tell me?
I think they would.
Okay. So, so one more thing, the side story that sold everybody, the grocery store, that was really just a story. I mean, the grocery store never happened. I read that paper, and I'm not hearing anything about a grocery store going to happen.
I can't speak to that. I read the
I
same
mean,
newspaper.
it was part of the floor conversation. Probably not part of your department, but it was part of the sale
I
on the
agree.
floor.
I agree. And 3 years later, there have been some real estate properties in downtown Heston acquired for presumably the grocery store, but there is no grocery store. And I'm told, although I have not been to Heston, Kansas, I'm told there's not even a coming soon sign.
A what?
A coming soon
Oh, yeah,
sign.
right. Okay. Thank you.
Senator Thompson.
Actually, I'm going to let the other two senators step ahead of me because I have something on a completely different topic, so.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think you just answered part of my question. I had heard rumor that this has possibly generated over $2 million. And if you're saying 2.5% for each transaction, what transactions? And who's managing these transactions and what are they?
I can't get into the details without violating the covenant of not disclosing examination findings, other than to say that the transactions that have occurred have not been very many since the inception, and they are at a lull right now, presumably, my presumption, based on their lack of ability to fund any subsequent transactions, unless they fund it with a non-cash kind of asset pledge. If they do that and pledge it to Commerce, I don't know if Commerce has the ability to leverage that asset to provide it the cash needed for an economic development or not. I can't speak to that.
Senator Schallenberger.
I can speak to that. I asked Commerce the question. They got 275,000 last year, and they supported, and they gave that out in grants to 13 grants in communities with population of 5,000 or less. So that's how much so far TEFI has given the Commerce Department.
Senator Mcin.
Since you have an inside track to Commerce, I just really would love to know about those assets, because it's kind of like, you sold me a horse and I got a mule, you know, and not to quote a musical, but so, you know, are these assets that we can break down and actually use and make money, you know? So I might sell my old tractor anyway.
Senator Thompson.
Yeah, getting off the TEFI path, I do want to have time to read and digest all that. I heard yesterday that the Fed is printing $1 trillion every 100 days, which would put us on track of being $38 trillion in debt by the end of this year. Do you foresee any way they can lower the interest rate or raise the interest rate without completely causing turmoil and chaos? And where do you see this mess ending?
You know, I saw the same, and I happened to be on an airplane when I was reading it, and I just about fell out of my chair.
Yeah, no.
I don't know. They didn't call me and ask me, you know.
I didn't
And
suspect.
they seldom do. But I will say that minds a lot sharper than mine have so far negotiated and controlled the economy so that it has had somewhat of a soft landing through the last 2 years, when everybody expected a recession to hit and hit hard. So the aggressive increase in interest rates that we saw over the 2-year period has certainly had an adverse impact on banks' balance sheets and borrowers' balance sheets, because deals that work at 3% don't work at 9%. People who are making loans, running banks, and making decisions in banks now, and their borrowers who are running companies and businesses and family budgets and that sort of thing, if they're under 50 years old, they have never seen interest rates this high. So I think there's a lot of knowledge out there that has helped get through, but the wisdom of how to deal in this kind of economic cycle is being developed daily. And I can only hope that we have very good, knowledgeable people who are generating wisdom, so in 25 years, they can be standing where I'm saying, back in 2024, like I say, back in the 1980s or back in 2008 and that sort of thing.
And that's kind of my point, you know, this is not your 1980s situation where the inflation rate hit, I remember early 80s, 15, 18%.
Red hit 20%.
20%, but we didn't have the debt that we have right now. And that's my concern. You do have a hard ceiling upside to this interest rate. Otherwise, at some point, all we're going to be doing on the federal side is paying off the interest on the debt, not even the debt itself. Right. Yeah.
And that's a huge challenge.
And that's coming fast.
I think so.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Schellenberger.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. I was a banker in 1981, and I remember my dad getting 18% on a CD, and he thought, man, I could live forever. But he didn't. Regular banking, I'm on a bank board, and the FDIC insurance has doubled this year because, I guess, of the problems in Silicon Valley banks. I know you're not the FDIC, but that has it comes right out of the bottom line of a bank, and we have to. It's not an option whether we buy that or not. It's we have to pay it, and small banks. We're a $135 million bank, which is a small bank in Kansas. Do you have any input? I mean, does the comptroller, Treasury Department, do you serve on any national boards, and do they know the effect that things like that have on small rural banks? And do they care? We believe they don't care, but
and when I was running a bank, I had similar. What happens on Wall Street doesn't happen on Main Street. So don't hold me in my $100 million bank that was headquartered in Kansas City, Kansas. Do not hold me responsible for what's going on Wall Street. That's totally different. Yet I was paying the FDIC insurance premiums, and I was complaining about them going up and that sort of thing. I pointed out in my testimony that the aggregate total of Kansas Bank's assets is $60 billion. That's about 25% of the smallest of the three bank failures from a year ago. That's about 25% of all of the banks in Kansas, state banks in Kansas, aggregated to either Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, the one in New York, Signature Bank, and First Republic. All of those three dwarfed the aggregate totals of Kansas banks. So there can't be, in my mind, there can't be a logical comparison between what goes on there and what goes on in your $130 million asset bank, where you know your clients, you know your management, and your clients know you.
I'm not sure that we should be paying Oprah Winfrey's to keep her deposits safe, or Bill Gates to keep his deposits safe, out of our FDIC insurance. But they don't ask me that.
To your point, your question to me is, am I involved in any others? The closest that comes is there is a trade association of bank commissioners from all of the states, all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and I think 3 territories. It's called the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. It's a quasi-political, a quasi-governmental agency, and we do communicate frequently, aggressively, and with loud voices to our federal counterparts at the Fed, the FDIC, and that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, I'll be in Washington, D.C. Later this month to do that advocacy on behalf of banks in Kansas.
I don't see any more questions, David. I have one. See if I can form this right. If BFF LLC fails as a TIF fee, are Kansas taxpayers on the hook?
It's a great question, and I don't know. If a bank fails, a state bank fails, it's my duty to revoke its charter and to name a receiver. Always that receiver is the FDIC, because that's who insures the deposits. Because a TEFI, first, doesn't hold deposits, and second, doesn't have a federal counterpart, there is no path as to what happens if a TEFI ceases doing business, either voluntarily or involuntarily. What happens to the assets? I don't know. Further complicated in this situation is that it's not our charter. It's not the OSBC or the state banking's charter. It's the legislators. So I don't think that it would pass to name the Kansas legislature as the receiver for a TEFI. If it involved a bankruptcy, the bankruptcy court would have some jurisdiction. So there's more questions than I have answers for.
Well, David, I don't see any other questions. Thanks for your pamphlet and explaining to us your job. You know, when we were doing the fee funds, we didn't have enough time to really get into your department very much. And so we do appreciate you coming back as well and being prepared to answer questions on that last topic. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
And we enjoyed your company, so thank you.
Thank you.
Well, committee, I have nothing else on the agenda. We're adjourned.